Today I want to talk about 7 guns and manufacturers that have somewhat of a haunting history behind them. I'm going to show you some specific examples of guns that I own and tell you a little bit of the story and what makes some of these have a little bit darker past than what you may realize. Now, the whole idea of this video is to give you information on some of the dark history that's associated with these companies and with the firearms themselves, but it's in no way meant to throw shade at any of these companies. So just understand that. I just want to tell you some of the interesting facts that I know about some of these guns, and some of these things may honestly surprise you. So after the video, let me know down below which one of these facts surprised you the most, or leave your own down below. And if you like what we do, consider subscribing. Let's go and get into it. Now, one of the more haunting scenarios comes from Winchester. And in the mid 1850s, it's kind of crazy to think that in the evolution of Winchester, you had Tyler Henry, who would go on to create Henry rifles. You had Smith & Wesson. You had Oliver Winchester. And all of these guys had a part in making what eventually would become the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. Started life as the Volcanic Repeating Arms Company, which was made famous by Walter Hunt's rocket ball, which was a metallic cartridge with a hollow cavity. The powder was put in the cavity. It had a hole so, the round could be ignited. And eventually, I believe Smith left first, Daniel Wesson followed. Then Henry felt like he was undercompensated, so he tried to take over the company. And that's when Oliver Winchester jumped in, stalled that, and changed the name to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. So all of that is very interesting on its own. But then you have Sarah Winchester. She's married to William Winchester, who is the son of Oliver. Well, William dies. Her son, a 1 month old, dies. And the story goes that she was having some health issues, so she moved to San Jose, California. Well, after visiting a medium, she inherited all of this great wealth from the Winchester Company and the family that she married into. She ended up building this mansion in San Jose. It's called the Winchester Mystery House, and it's pretty interesting. If you want to look it up, I highly recommend it. There's actually a movie based on this as well, which is actually a pretty decent movie called Winchester. But regardless, she started building rooms in this house. The problem is some of the rooms, there was no rhyme or reason to it. Like, they would have staircases that led up just to the ceiling, doorways that led to nothing, doors with brick walls on the other side of them, crazy maze-like stairways in the house. And so the idea and the legend goes that she was building all of these rooms because she felt bad about all of the people that had been killed by Winchester rifles. And so in order to appease the ghost of these people, she built all these rooms, hopefully making it hard for the good ghosts to leave her house. Now, you may be thinking, oh, that's a bunch of BS and all of that. And of course, a lot of people say that it is BS, but it's still a pretty fun story that I was interested to learn about. And like I said, if you haven't caught that movie called Winchester, it's actually pretty freaking good. It's a solid new horror experience anyways, with a history around one of the most well-known firearms in the United States. And so Winchester definitely has some dark secrets there, whether some of them are true, some of them are fabricated, whatever. Still pretty cool to learn about. Another company I want to talk about here is Remington. Now, this kind of starts with the Union Metallic Cartridge Company, who developed a factory in Bridgeport, Connecticut. This was like in 1867. Now, this factory was known kind of for accidents, right? I think in 1903, 3 men died after an explosion. There was lead, dust, and powder in the air that people would obviously get sick by and eventually die by, I'm sure, because of that stuff in the air. The working conditions back then weren't up to standards like they are today. In 1906, there was a big explosion that was heard all the way in Long Island from Bridgeport. And then when things started to kick up in World War I, actually before World War I, in 1912, Remington joined them, and that's where you get Remington UMC. I mean, these guys were producing rifles from World War I to the Russian Civil War all the way to 23, like 10,000 rifles per day. And so when you have a lack in certain regulations, you have a bunch of gunpowder, chemicals, explosions, lack of safety, lack of knowledge, whatever you want to call it, accidents are going to happen. And that happened in 1942 as well, when one of the munitions buildings actually blew up, killed 7 people, and injured another 80 more. And there was reports of bullets that were flying into nearby homes. And this even goes into modern day. Remington is the only gun manufacturer that I know of that's ever been sued by victims of a mass shooting, and the Sandy Hook families actually won that lawsuit. But all in all, I mean, Remington has made some really fine guns over the years, and the Remington 700 is known as one of the best, reliable, and affordable bolt-action rifles still to this day. Now, here's a little tiny gun that has a pretty dark history attached to it. Walther made a number of guns in Nazi Germany, and their first iteration was the Walther PP, developed in 1929, and then in 1931 the PPK was released. Now these things were popular with German officers. The Luftwaffe carried them because, I mean, when you look at it, even by today's standards, it is a small, super concealable little firearm. The PP and the PPK are like the first successful double to single action guns. Decocker on the slide there with the safety as well. It is a pretty awesome carry gun. Again, there's so many, famous people that own these, from James Bond to Elvis Presley. Now, interestingly enough, a gun that come out of Nazi Germany, developed out of Nazi Germany, kind of ended the Reich in a way, because Hitler unalived himself with his own Walther PPK. He always carried one of these guns on him, and for good reason. Like I said, they are super concealable, and it's really interesting when you look at, how he responded over those last few months where he was in the Fuhrer bunker. That's where he was going to live or die, right? And it became apparent that they were going to lose the war, and that's where he was going to stay. I don't care how many shows they come up with, Hitler died in 1945 in the Fuhrer bunker. And unless there's solid evidence to prove otherwise, I'll never believe anything other than that. But either way, it's a fascinating story. He, married Eva Braun one day before they both killed themselves because of her, undying loyalty to him. And from what I've read, she didn't want to shoot herself in the head because she didn't want her face maimed or something, so she ended up taking a cyanide capsule. But either way, at that point, both bodies were burned, so I don't know what it really matters. But anyways, he wasn't the only famous person to kill himself with one of these guns. Actually, Freddie Prinze, who is the father of Freddie Prinze Jr., killed himself with an Astra, which is a copy of the Walther PPK. Now, you had to know at some point John Moses Browning or one of his designs would make it onto this list, and it's not because of the man himself. He is highly respected in the gun world even today, but his very last design, which was the High Power, has somewhat of a dark past. When he sold the patent and rights to the 1911 to Colt, he was actually tasked by the French military to come up with a new design, and they had a number of requirements to fulfill that new pistol. It had to hold a minimum of 10 rounds, had to be easy to break down and clean, actually had to unalive a man at like 55 meters, and he was able to come up with a design that could fulfill their needs. With the help of Dieudonné Sauvé, and I know I'm butchering that to some extent, but Sauvé actually created a double stack magazine at the same time. Problem for Colt is their patent expired in 1928. And so Sauvé was able to take some of the features from the 1911 and put it into the High Power that we essentially know today. Now, the French didn't end up adopting this exact gun. They adopted the model 1935, which had less capacity. It looks similar, but not the same. But the Belgian army did adopt the FN High Power. So in 1935, they started production, and I believe it still is the Belgian army sidearm and a number of countries around the world. Problem is, 1940, the Nazis occupied Belgium and the factory that was making the high power. Now, before this, plans were sent to John Inglis in Toronto. You know, the Belgians essentially knew the inevitable was coming, so they were able to get those plans. So not only did it serve for the occupiers, Nazi Germany, but also for Allied forces as well. And this gun was infamously carried by the Waffen-SS and the Fallschirmjäger. And this is a captured gun out of Nazi Germany. And still to this day, I really love this gun. I love the design. Super natural point of aim. Good set of sights. 13 rounds in the magazine, when at the time, single stack mags were pretty much the only way to go. So Sauvé really did an incredible thing by coming up with this magazine design, and pretty revolutionary, you know, and something that we still use today. Magazine release is in a perfect spot. It has the external safety. Of course, it's single action only. And again, one of the best shooting guns that I own, but definitely a dark history attached to it. Next gun I want to talk about is the Mosin Nagant, but probably not in the way that you're thinking. In the 1939 and 1940 Winter War, Russia invaded Finland, and one Finnish soldier in particular really stood out in this conflict. Simo Hayha, I think I'm saying that right, I hope I'm saying that right, used an M2830. And the Finnish versions of these rifles, it's a little bit shorter than the gun you see here, and they're typically known as higher quality, but any Mosin Nagant essentially is super reliable and fairly cheap to make. I mean, I think 60 million of these rifles were made. And even this one right here, if you want to get into World War II collecting, it is a great place to start because it's relatively cheap. Not as cheap as it used to be, but when you talk about the price of some of this stuff, it's relatively inexpensive to get into. And the ammo is still widely available, the 7.62x54R, and this gun is accurate. And so he would take his M2830 and go on to record 505 kills by himself. Actually, the Christmas of '39, he recorded 25 kills that day, or it was the day before Christmas. Either way, 25 kills in one day. Now, Russians are used to cold weather, but this winter specifically was really cold. Talking about feet and feet and feet of snow and negative 30-degree temps. I'm from the South, man. If I see any temperatures like that, I would probably freeze up like a popsicle in a couple of minutes. I mean, it's really crazy to think about. So what he would do is he would set his rifle up and set it up where there was very little kick up from the muzzle blast, fill his mouth with snow, and so the enemy couldn't see his breath, and take his shot. He used an unscoped M2830. He liked the iron sights, and that's the way he rolled, man. Like I said, 505 confirmed kills. And he lived all the way up until 2002. So if you want to do some research on a pretty interesting character, he is a hero, really. Definitely do some research on Simo Hayha. It's pretty incredible what he did with one of these rifles. No dark history gun video would be complete without a German Luger. Now, this design, George Luger basically took what was good about the bore-sharp pistol and slimmed it down and made it much more, carryable and in a more concealable package, if you will. 55-degree grip angle, 9mm. Actually, the Swiss adopted this first in like 7.65. And so many of these were made during World War I that they were used in World War II as well. And it was replaced, technically, in 1938 by the Walther P38. Uses a falling block system, just like the Beretta M9 today does, but it's also much cheaper to make. These were 14 bucks back then. These were 19. So if you translate that to today's dollars with inflation, 240 bucks to like $340 or $331. So it was a pretty big difference in production costs there. And the P38 is no slouch when it comes to accuracy, simple to use, and obviously it has a slide compared to the toggle action of the Luger, just like that. And while these things could be susceptible to jamming because of this action and fouling and all that kind of stuff, this is one of the more accurate pistols from that time that I've ever shot. Interestingly, though, these became a prized possession of Allied forces. Well, the Germans knew this, and so they would rig these things up with bombs or mines, and so when a Allied soldier would come along, unfortunately, some of them lost their life or limb trying to pick one up because it'd be attached to a mine or something like that. So really, really an interesting, dark period of history. These guns just happen to be a part of that. So I really, every time I handle these guns and I shoot these guns, I just imagine who owned this specific gun. This one, by the way, and both of these are from Nazi Germany. This one's 1938, and this one is an AC-43, and made by Walther. AC stands for Walther. 1.2 million of these guns were made by 3 different companies. And I have read reports that Allied soldiers actually, when they would pick up the P38 and the Luger, honestly, they would actually carry it as their main sidearm at that point because of how accurate they really are. So 2 more guns with a dark history. Now, like I said before, I am not here to throw shade on any of these companies. Walther is one of my favorite companies to this day. You can look at things from today's perspective and cast all your accusations at them for things they knew nothing about. A lot of people were a product of their own circumstances, and that's just the way it was, man. It was just different. And so a lot of guns throughout history have pretty dark past associated with them, but I really love guns like this because I just think about the history and, not only who carried this gun, but the Allied soldier that retrieved it, that sent it home, and then it was passed down, and then it was passed down, and then it was passed down to me where I purchased it. So I really love that stuff, man. Even though I don't do a lot of World War II stuff on my channel, it doesn't get a lot of views, I still personally love it. So what I'll make sure I do is get all my playlists in order, because I haven't done that in a long time, and just set all the World War II reviews that I've done into a playlist. So if y'all want to watch those and enjoy them, I'd definitely love to do more of these. I just wish they got more views and more people enjoyed them like I do. But I really love this stuff, and so it's one of the passions that I have here on the channel. So if you want to join me in the passions that I do and you want to help support us further, again, subscribing, drop me a like, a share on the video if you like it. You want to share it, all of that kind of stuff is free. And if you want to support us further, Patreon, YouTube, $1 a year. I mean, as little as $1 a year can literally help out quite a bit. Big thanks to you guys. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.